Welcome to the spring tour of the Japanese garden in Delaware Park. My name is Paula Hinz and I'm a friend of the Japanese garden, and I'm here to introduce the blossoming cherry trees to you, the sakura. Nothing says spring more than that pop of color that a cherry tree brings to a garden or a landscape. Did you know that the Japanese garden in Delaware Park is the only Japanese garden in the US that is in a Frederick Law Olmsted design park? It's free and open to the public, so it's a real gem for Buffalonians. Let's go in and take a look. The Japanese garden is a strolling garden. So as a visitor, you're invited to walk through the garden to experience it. There's no one spot in the garden that reveals the whole garden in one piece, so you have to walk it. Cherry trees, or sakura, are deciduous ornamental trees. Now, when will the cherry trees bloom? That's the question we often hear. It's a little bit like, when will the blizzard arrive? When it's winter time and snow is coming, we check the weather stations and get a feel for when the weather will change and a snow blizzard might arrive, and we do the preparation. In the spring, with the cherry trees, it's exactly the same, but in reverse. You watch the weather and then you come outside to enjoy it. Now, how long will the trees bloom? It's difficult to say because it depends on Mother Nature. When she delivers warm days, day after day, they bloom quickly and drop. If there's a little bit of cold involved, they might extend a little more. For us in Buffalo, in the Japanese garden, we have several varieties, which means that our blossoming schedule can last a month. Because as you can see, we've got trees in bloom already, the early bloomers, and then we've got some cherry trees like this one that haven't bloomed yet. They're late bloomers. So we're really lucky in Buffalo to have a pretty extended blossoming season. So how do you identify a cherry tree? First of all, take a look at the form of the tree. It's usually got a dense crown. That's the top. Then look a little closer at the trunk. The trunk is a pale gray and it often has lenticels, these horizontal pores. To me, they look a little bit like scars. This isn't a very old tree, so it looks like it's had a lot of life. And then the last thing you can look at are the flowers. So this tree has bloomed, but right here we can see when the bud came out, it had one bud and several flowers came out of it. And then when you look at the flower in bloom, you can see this one has 5 petals. Typically a cherry tree or a cherry blossom has 5 petals with a serrated tip, and then it gives that flower a sort of ruffled look. One of the reasons we love cherry trees so much in spring is we can see it right here. The blossoms come out before the leaves. Typically, not every cultivar, but it means that the trees really pop in color with no green to have to share the spotlight with it. Take a look at the YOSHINO cherry tree. I can identify it because it has 5 petals. In early bloom, it's a light pink and then it opens to a white. This is the most commonly planted cherry tree in the United States, and people like it because it's a hardy tree. When you first enter the Japanese garden, the design has been set up to give you a really beautiful, contained feeling walking through the snow goose cherry trees. These are also white flowers with 5 petals, and look how they've been planted to create a canopy. This is my favorite part of entering the garden in spring. Now look at the ACCOLADE cherry tree. It's another one of the early bloomers. It's got a semi-double petal, and they're pink, and they really brighten up the garden, and they would brighten up your garden as well. Look how lucky we are to have this tree in a public park. Do you notice how the branches really extend and they hang down into our public space? Now this is an autumnalis, and if you notice, it's a semi-double flower. It's a pale pink, and what is special about this tree is it can bloom in the fall as well. Take a look at our weeping cherry tree. I'm standing underneath the draping branches of this beautiful tree. A weeping tree tends to be quite stunning, and the cascading branches bring a really beautiful feel to a garden. So these are a couple days away from blossoming, unless it's really warm today, and then they might be blossoming by the end of the day. It's hard to tell. We have to ask Mother Nature. I love the Kwanzan cherry tree. This cultivar actually dates back to 17th century in Japan, and it's a late bloomer. It's a double blossom, and it's a very intense pink. Everybody smiles when they see this tree in bloom. And look at the bark, it's that pale gray with the horizontal lenticels. This tree is stunning. So keep in mind with the Kwanzan, if you do decide to put it in your yard, put it in a place that you can see from a window in your house. You are going to want to enjoy this tree in bloom. It will bring spring inside the house as you sit and look out. Right next to the Kwanzan, we've got a Mount Fuji variety. It's a double white blossom, and look, this is already in bloom. So each variety has its own blooming schedule. Take a look at that if you decide to plant one in your garden. Cherry blossoms remind us to live in the present. That fascination with cherry blossoms originated in Japan more than 1,000 years ago. And the samurai warriors waxed poetic about the blossoms, their beauty, and the delicate presence and ephemeral nature. When they began to bloom, people flocked to see them in their glory, seizing the moment. These tiny blossoms remind us that we should count our blessings and enjoy today.